At the age of 20, I took a life with my own hands. Following the act, I underwent extensive plastic surgery to mirror the exact appearance of my victim, adopting her identity and living under her name up until this very moment. But last night, the grandfather of the woman I killed was brutally murdered. Evidence recovered from the crime scene indicated that the perpetrator was an insider, a member of the family. To systematically rule out suspects, authorities demanded that my blood be drawn for DNA testing. A blood draw. My voice involuntarily spiked in pitch. Why? The responding officer raised an eyebrow. Your family is certainly strange. Every single one of you reacts so intensely the moment a DNA test is mentioned. Everyone reacted intensely, placed within the context of this particular family. It made perfect sense. Today was Patriarch Wen's 70th birthday. According to the annual tradition, it was supposed to be his second son's turn to bring him home for the celebration. However, exactly 3 days prior to the event, Grandpa Wen sent a sudden message to the family group chat. He announced that he would be reading his last will and testament on the day of his birthday, explicitly demanding that everyone's attendance was mandatory. The balance in Grandpa Wen's bank account sat at a staggering 8 figures. Naturally, no one was willing to miss out on such a lucrative opportunity. And so, after 5 years of estrangement, the Wen family was finally reunited. Grandpa Wen had been living alone for a long time. Consequently, after a brief, tense dinner last night, we all returned to our respective hotels. It was not until this morning that the police contacted us with the news. Grandpa Wen had passed away. By the time I rushed to the scene, the area was heavily cordoned off. Grandpa Wen, dressed in his pajamas, lay face down on the living room rug. Forensic analysts determined that the fatal blow had been struck to the back of his head. The victim had been bludgeoned with a decorative display trophy with such ferocity that flesh and blood were rendered indistinguishable, and brain matter was faintly visible. Both of his arms were fractured, leading investigators to deduce that he had desperately tried to shield his head before his death. The rest of his body fared no better, covered in severe contusions that clearly indicated a violent, desperate struggle. The lock on the front door had been forced open. The living room was thoroughly ransacked, and every gold bar and stack of cash previously kept in the safe had vanished. Correlating this with over a dozen recent break-ins in the same residential area over the past 6 months, law enforcement tentatively concluded that a burglar had likely broken in, inadvertently awakened the sleeping homeowner, and upon facing fierce resistance, murdered him to eliminate a witness. Yet less than half a day later, investigators entirely overturned their initial theory. Authorities announced they had discovered blood at the scene suspected to belong to the killer. DNA analysis revealed that the blood shared a genetic lineage with Grandpa Wen. Consequently, every member of the family was mandated to provide a blood sample for DNA cross-referencing. The lead investigator assigned to the case was a man named Sun, reportedly the youngest captain on the force. He looked at me, his gaze laced with intense scrutiny. Upon hearing that a family member murdered your grandfather, you do not seem surprised in the slightest. Did you find my grandfather's will at the crime scene? I countered. Captain Sun remained silent. Obviously, they had not. I maintained a placid expression, offering a faint smile. Despite being immensely wealthy, my grandfather has not given us a single dime over the years. Even when my second uncle was short on funds for a medical operation, he refused to spare a single cent. Furthermore, he declared on more than one occasion that upon his death, his entire estate would be donated to charity. So, are you really that surprised? Besides, this would not be the first time they have tried to make a move against him. Captain Sun pondered this for a moment before speaking in a low, gravelly voice. If that is the case, Miss Wenran, please cooperate with us. We need to collect your DNA. I instinctively took a step back, waving my hand in refusal. That won't be necessary. I returned to my hotel at 9 p.m. last night, I explained. I have not stepped foot outside since. The hotel has surveillance cameras. You can go and pull the footage. Moreover, the medical examiner stated that my grandfather's time of death was between 11,000 p.m. and midnight. During that exact time frame, I was ordering room service because I accidentally spilled soup on my blanket and had to call housekeeping up to change it. Both the delivery driver and the cleaning staff saw me. I have an airtight alibi, so there is absolutely no need for me to take this test. Your logic is sound, Captain Sun replied with a slight hum. However, during our secondary sweep of the crime scene, we discovered that after committing the murder, the perpetrator turned on the air conditioning to its cooling setting and placed it on a 4-hour timer. I understood his implication immediately. The artificially lowered room temperature would severely skew the forensic estimation of the time of death. Simultaneously, he continued, the surveillance cameras at the hotel you are staying at have been broken for half a month. So what? I raised my chin, meeting his hawk-like stare. That only proves there were oversights in your department's initial investigative work. Why was not this anomaly discovered during the first crime scene examination? Refusing to bicker with him any further, I cut straight to the point. What is the suspect's blood type? Type A. I am type O. Based on that fact alone, I am already cleared of suspicion. With that, I pulled a blood donor certificate from my purse, which clearly displayed my blood type as O. Miss Wen, you seem highly averse to taking this test. Could it be that you harbor a secret you cannot afford to have exposed? As he spoke, his eyes locked onto mine, exuding the heavy pressure of a formal interrogation. He was suspicious of me, and reasonably so. My grandfather had just died, and as his granddaughter, not only was I displaying an abnormal level of apathy, but I was also actively evading the investigation. There is no secret. I suffer from hemophobia, a severe fear of blood. Hearing this, his expression darkened. Should I interpret this as you deliberately resisting a police investigation? The young detective standing beside him quickly tugged at his sleeve. Captain Sun, let me handle this. The young officer then turned to me with a bright smile. Miss Wen, if you are afraid of blood, we can easily collect a buccal swab from inside your cheek. You just need to. I cut him off impatiently. I said it is not necessary. Do you people not understand plain English? As the standoff continued, the doorbell rang. It was the housekeeping staff I had called earlier. She stepped into the room, glancing hesitantly between me and the two police officers. Excuse me, do you still need the room cleaned? She asked timidly. Originally, I had intended to have her change the bed linens, but my underwear was currently tangled up in those very blankets, and these two officers were lingering with no intention of leaving. Instead, I casually grabbed the trash bag from the bathroom and handed it to her. Just throw this away. I do not need anything else done. I then turned back to Captain Sun. I have just told you, I have type O blood. It does not match the killer's blood type. Do I really need to teach you basic deductive logic? Finishing my piece, I gestured toward the door, making it clear they were to leave. Captain Sun pressed his lips into a tight line. True to form, he did not press the issue any further. He merely gave me one last, profound look before turning on his heel and striding away. Watching their silhouettes disappear down the hallway, my facade finally crumbled. I collapsed onto the floor, my strength entirely drained. Captain Sun was right. I did harbor an unspeakable secret. I was not Wenran. Wenran had died 5 years ago, murdered by my own hands. Wenran and I were university classmates. Despite being in the same class, we had never exchanged a single complete sentence. That was until our sophomore year, when my elderly grandmother, whose health was already frail, suffered a sudden brain hemorrhage. Faced with astronomical medical bills, I was driven to a dead end, allowing my academic advisor to drag me from classroom to solicit donations. Wenran was the largest contributor. Afterward, she approached me, mentioning she had a job opportunity and asked if I was interested. The salary was $3,000 a month. 3,000. What did that number even mean to me? My grandmother used to travel to the provincial capital at the crack of dawn to sell vegetables, making barely 1,000 an entire month. I worked full shifts at the school cafeteria for mere pennies. Instinctively, I suspected the job might involve illicit work, but the temptation of that sum was overwhelming. Gritting my teeth, I asked for the job details, silently resolving that as long as it was not too degrading, I would endure it. Seeing through my apprehension, she smiled and clarified. Don't misunderstand. It is just that my grandpa Wen needs a caretaker. He is incredibly stubborn and has cursed out and fired every person we have hired so far. I heard you grew up living with your grandmother, so you must be very good at taking care of the elderly. I wanted to see if you would be willing to give it a try. During that period, I was desperately hunting for work. While my grandmother's immediate hospital fees had been covered, she would require ongoing medication. Furthermore, the surgery had left her with a mild disability, not life-threatening, but enough to strip away her ability to perform manual labor. I needed to find a way to move her to the city with me as quickly as possible. Otherwise, leaving her alone in the countryside would practically guarantee she would starve to death. This job was like a lifeline tossed to a drowning person, a beacon of hope allowing me to survive. Wenran explained. From Monday to Friday, my grandfather attends a senior citizens academy. During that time, you only need to come over, cook dinner, and tidy up the house. However, on Saturdays and Sundays, you must stay over. Fearing I might get the wrong idea, she emphatically added that Grandpa Wen possessed a highly reclusive personality and despised living with his children. It was strictly for safety reasons that she wanted a caretaker to stay the weekend. Before I went, I mentally prepared myself. Even if Grandpa Wen told me to get lost, I would accept it with a smile. This money was simply too critical for me. To my surprise, Grandpa Wen was nowhere near as unapproachable as I had imagined. He spoke little, was barely a picky eater, and most importantly, he paid my wages flawlessly on time. Just as I thought life was finally beginning to smile upon me, tragedy struck again. While walking to the bathroom, my grandmother slipped and struck her head against the floor. By the time she was discovered, she was completely unresponsive. The doctor stated that if she had been brought in half an hour later, her life could not have been saved. However, the surgical fees this time were double the previous amount. The doctor pressured me to make a swift decision. If we did not operate, she would die. But what was I supposed to use to save her? Right at that critical juncture, Wenran sought me out again. She told me she could cover the medical bills and even hire a professional nurse to care for my grandmother. She would shoulder every single expense herself. What is the condition? I asked, my voice hoarse. With an air of dark secrecy, she slipped a small bottle of medication into my hand. Swap my grandfather's calcium pills with these. You must watch him every day and make sure he swallows them. Will this take his life? I asked. Her silence was the most deafening answer. My body went rigid. I stared at Wenran in absolute disbelief. But that is your grandfather. How could you? She cut me off impatiently, her face contorting into a mask of coldness I had never seen before. Exactly. He is my grandfather. What does it have to do with you? Why do you care? Don't tell me you have actually developed feelings for him after waiting on him for a month. Don't be naive, Arao. Did you really think he has not yelled at you or fired you because he sees you as family? To him, you are nothing more than an obedient dog. Finishing her tirade, she shoved the bottle of pills hard into my palm. Your grandmother, or my grandfather, you choose. It was in that shattering moment I realized Wenran had never possessed any intention of helping me. Her praise for my resilience, her feigned sympathy for my lowly status, as I carried the weight of my family, all of it was a fabricated lie. From the very beginning to the bitter end, she only ever intended to use me as a tool to murder her own grandfather. The familiar ringtone of my phone violently yanked me back to reality. It was Wenran's mother. On the other end of the line, she was so paralyzed with anxiety. Her voice sounded as if it were tearing her throat apart. Ran. Did the police come looking for you? Oh, yes, the police said. A family member murdered Grandpa. Do you think the things we did in the past might be discovered by the cops? I rubbed my temples, forcing patience into my voice to console her. No, they won't. Grandpa was bludgeoned to death with a blunt object. It has nothing to do with us. The woman exhaled a massive sigh of relief. That is good. That is good. You have no idea how terrified your mother was when the police showed up at the door. They said they had to draw blood. You know, your mother was born with a mortal fear of pain. In the end, they just plucked a strand of my hair. God damn it. Hair. A horrific realization struck me. Ignoring Mother Wen, who was still rambling on the phone, I abruptly hung up and began frantically tearing through my belongings. Not on the bed. Not on the desk. Finally, my eyes landed on a crumpled ball of toilet paper resting on the bathroom sink. Inside that wad of paper should have been the stray hairs I had meticulously collected from every corner of the room. It was a strict habit I had cultivated over the past 5 years. Whenever I entered an unfamiliar environment, I absolutely refused to leave behind a single trace that could expose my true identity. I stared at the wad of paper, debating whether to take it outside and burn it or flush it directly down the toilet. But a second later, I noticed something glaringly wrong. The paper was tightly crumpled, and there was a faint smudge of lipstick on it. But when I gathered my hair, I had used a completely fresh piece of tissue. Swallowed by dread, I slowly unfolded it. In the next second, all the color drained from my face. It was empty. How could this be? I clearly remembered. My line of sight drifted downward to the adjacent trash can, and a memory flashed through my mind. When the police knocked on my door, that ball of tissue had been in my hand. Because I was so tense, I had tossed it onto the sink and mindlessly swept everything else into the trash bin. I was dead. With no time to even panic, I bolted out of the room to hunt down the housekeeping maid from earlier. After searching relentlessly for half an hour, I finally found her cleaning a room that had just been vacated. Catching sight of her cleaning cart, I let out a massive sigh of relief. As I began digging through the trash on her cart, I asked, "I am the guest from room 203. Where is the trash bag I just gave you? I accidentally threw away something important in it." She recognized me instantly. "Oh, that." The police said it was material evidence. They took all of it away. They took it. My voice sliced sharply through the dead silence of the hallway. The maid hurriedly defended herself. "If you do not believe me, go ask the police yourself. I did not steal your belongings." My knees gave out, and I slumped to the floor. For 5 years, I had lived as Wenran. Every single day, I lived like a sewer rat, hyper-vigilant, walking on thin ice. I had never stepped foot into a hair salon. I had never gotten a manicure. All because I lived in sheer terror that someone would uncover my secret. And now, everything was ruined. I had personally handed the evidence over to the police on a silver platter. Looking up, I locked eyes with the face reflected in the hallway window. A face that was at once intimately familiar and entirely foreign. A ferocious surge of indignation boiled up inside me. To become Wenran, I had endured 10 reconstructive plastic surgeries. Within a single month, I had starved myself to lose 10 kilograms just because Wenran had been naturally thin since childhood. I did it so no one would notice a single discrepancy. For 5 long years, I had never allowed myself the luxury of a full meal. Now, after excruciating hardship, I had finally clawed my way to my current position, becoming the widely admired Director Wen. I no longer had to worry about food or clothing. I could buy any luxury brand item I desired without blinking an eye. I could travel to cities I had previously only seen on television. No, absolutely not. I would never permit anyone to destroy what I had sacrificed everything to build. But how was I going to handle the immediate crisis? As I walked back to my room, my brain operated in overdrive. Denial. After all, Captain Sun's method of collecting evidence was not exactly above board. I could simply grit my teeth and insist those hairs did not belong to me. But I swiftly discarded that idea. Years ago, when my grandmother was hospitalized, I had donated blood to her. The moment the police ran the DNA through the system, they would instantly discover it belonged to Lin Rao. Sure enough, early the next morning, Captain Sun came looking for me again. He did not mince words. "Have you seen Lin Rao recently?" Lin Rao. How long had it been since I last heard that name spoken from someone else's mouth? It had to be at least 5 years. From the day I resolved to become Wenran, I had obliterated every single thing that belonged to my past self. The clothes I had worn, the bowls I had eaten from, the wall plastered with my academic awards, and the very house that held all my memories with my grandmother. I had set fire to all of it, burning it to the ground. Back then, I naively believed that if those physical objects ceased to exist, no one would ever mention the name Lin Rao again. Only later did I realize I was merely deluding myself. Even without those remnants, no one ever remembered me anyway. What? Captain Sun furrowed his brow. Is that such a difficult question to answer? I smiled. Of course not. I saw her the night before last. The night Grandpa Wen was murdered. From what time to what time? Why did not you mention this when I questioned you yesterday? I feigned the effort of searching my memory. Around 8:30 p.m. I bumped into her on my way back. If she had not greeted me, I would not have even recognized her. Come to think of it, we had not seen each other in years. My tone was so flawlessly earnest, I almost convinced myself. Did she come back to the hotel with you? I shook my head. No. We just stood chatting on the sidewalk for about half an hour. Captain Sun stared at me unblinkingly. Last night we found strands of Lin Rao's hair in the trash bag you threw away. I had not expected him to strip away the pretense so brutally, and for a fleeting second, I forgot how I was supposed to react. Fortunately, my head was tilted downward, concealing my expression from him. After a long pause, I raised my head, staring coldly into Captain Sun's piercing eyes. I did not realize Captain Sun had a hobby of rummaging through other people's garbage. Last night was freezing, and Lin Rao was only wearing a thin jacket. So I took off my overcoat and let her wear it for a while. Is that against the law? I vaguely recalled that there were only 2 or 3 strands of hair in that tissue last night. Captain Sun let out a non-committal, Getting a few hairs stuck to a borrowed coat is indeed a very common occurrence, he conceded, before sharply pivoting the conversation. However, according to my understanding, you two were hardly the types who could sit down calmly for a casual chat. My heart seized. He was right. Lin Rao and Wen Ran could never coexist peacefully. Wen Ran owed Lin Rao a life. My grandmother's gentle face instinctively flashed across my mind. Even after 5 years, remembering her still made my heart ache to the point of suffocation. Back then, forced to choose between my grandmother and Grandpa Wen, I had decisively chosen my grandmother. Wenran seemed to have anticipated my choice. She threw a thick stack of cash directly into my face, an incredibly humiliating gesture, yet I simultaneously felt a grim sense of relief that I still held some exploitable value to her. Don't worry, I won't have you do this for free, she had said. Once my grandfather dies, I will give you another 200,000. 5 hours later, my grandmother was wheeled out of the operating room. The surgery was a success. Her life had been saved. Using that as my justification, I requested a half-month leave of absence from the university. But my actual task was not caring for my grandmother. It was monitoring Grandpa Wen to ensure he consumed the poison pills. Wenran told me the drug would cause extreme physical deterioration within a week. By then, Grandpa Wen would inevitably begin drafting his will. She instructed me to notify her the exact moment he contacted his lawyer, and ordered me to probe into where the will was hidden. It was only then that I learned Grandpa Wen's bank account held an 8-figure sum. My relationship with Grandpa Wen was already quite warm, and driven by overwhelming guilt, I began treating him with even greater devotion. When he suffered from severe incontinence, I did not hesitate for a single second to personally wash him and change his clothes. When he violently vomited, I was the one who comforted him while wiping the filth from his body. Gradually, the bond between me and Grandpa Wen grew incredibly close. He began taking the initiative to ask about my life, inquiring if I had a boyfriend, and even promising that if he lived to see the day I got married, he would personally prepare my dowry. I thought he was merely joking. Who could have anticipated that on the night of his 65th birthday, he would gather everyone to make a public announcement? The villa in the suburbs, I planned to transfer the deed to Lin Rao. This child has worked incredibly hard taking care of me. He ached for my hardships and wanted to provide me with a home, but he had absolutely no idea that I was only there to take his life. In that moment, the guilt inside me detonated. I waved my hands frantically. Grandpa, I can't accept this. The salary you already pay me is more than generous. He scanned the room of family members and asked, "Does anyone here have an objection?" Dead silence. Then, "It is settled. We will finalize the paperwork next week." I wanted to say more, but Grandpa Wen's firm gaze silenced me. At the time, I naively thought, once the party is over, I will sit down and have a proper talk with him. I absolutely cannot accept this house. But Wenran never gave me that opportunity. The very next day, vicious rumors flooded the university campus. The story went that Wen Ran had kindly set me up with a job, only for me to climb into her homeowner's bed. Damn, that old man is almost 70, and she still swallowed her pride enough to sleep with him. What does 70 matter? She was aiming for the money from the start. I heard ever since she moved into the Wen household, that old man's health has been rapidly declining. She is a succubus draining his life force away. Ha ha ha. The rumors crashed down like a tidal wave, suffocating me. It was not just the school. It felt as though the entire city knew of this scandalous affair. The academic advisor, the dean, and the principal took turns hauling me into their offices, demanding I find a way to prove my innocence, threatening expulsion if I failed. Before I could even untangle the nightmare at school, the hospital called with devastating news. My grandmother had committed suicide. It was Wen Ran. She had gone to the hospital and told my grandmother that her medical bills were paid for by me acting as a mistress. She told her that I had slept my way through men ranging from 70-year-old grandfathers to freshly graduated high school boys. She told my grandmother, if it was not for you, she never would have been forced down such a filthy, degraded path. What does it mean to commit psychological slaughter? That was it. That very night, my grandmother threw herself off the hospital roof. Her flesh was mutilated, her bones shattered. I could not even bear to imagine the agonizing depths of regret and guilt she must have endured in her final moments. After handling her funeral arrangements, I stormed the university to confront Wen Ran, fully prepared to fight her to the death. The altercation escalated so violently that the police were called, is the question that difficult to answer. Looking at Captain Sun's furrowed brow in the present, I smiled and waved a hand dismissively. Oh my, that was so many years ago. If you had not brought it up, I would have forgotten it entirely. I am sure Lin Rao herself has moved on by now. Forgotten, he sneered. Makes sense. The perpetrator naturally forgets, but the victim certainly does not. I profoundly agreed with his sentiment, but my current identity required me to play the role of the perpetrator. So I feigned indignation. What exactly are you implying? I am not a perpetrator. Lin Rao's grandmother committed suicide. I suggest you choose your words carefully, officer, or I will sue you for defamation. What am I implying? Captain Sun stood up abruptly, advancing toward me step by step. The invisible pressure he exerted made it slightly difficult to breathe. He articulated every word with lethal precision. I am implying that Lin Rao never forgot the trauma you inflicted upon her. Not only did she coerce your second uncle into murdering your grandfather, but she has now kidnapped him as well. Coerced him into murder, kidnapped him. I was utterly stunned, my mind blanking for several long moments before I could process his words. Lin Rao kidnapped second uncle, and he immediately assumed she was using Wen Wenbo as a pawn to kill Grandpa Wen. You do not look surprised, he noted. I shrugged, offering neither confirmation nor denial. Grandpa always despised second uncle. Everyone knows that. It was true. Wen Wenbo had never been in Grandpa Wen's good graces. And following an incident 5 years ago, that disdain had morphed into absolute disgust. Neighbors had frequently witnessed Grandpa Wen chasing his son out of the house with a broom. Conversely, out of consideration for me, Grandpa Wen's attitude toward Wen Ran's parents had softened significantly. He had hinted multiple times that he intended to leave a portion of his estate to them. Therefore, if the will were genuinely read, Wen Ran's parents were practically guaranteed a share. Wen Wenbo, however, was not. A cornered dog will bite. The possibility of him orchestrating a hit on Grandpa Wen was entirely plausible. What incident from 5 years ago? I looked at him coldly. It is just ugly family drama that has no bearing on this case. Captain Sun should rein in his morbid curiosity. He let out a cold scoff. Family drama. I am curious as to exactly when Lin Rao became a member of the Wen family. My heart skipped a beat. This Captain Sun was far from simple. He had managed to dig up even that piece of the past. 5 years ago, it was Grandpa Wen who came to the police station to bail me out. That day, Wen Ran and I had beaten each other bloody. She had ripped a massive patch of hair from my scalp, and I had battered both of her eyes until they were swollen shut. After delivering a stern lecture, the police demanded we call a family member to act as a guarantor. I stood there, paralyzed, not uttering a word. Wenran could not resist twisting the knife. "Officer, she is a cursed jinx that nobody wants. The only grandmother she had to rely on just jumped off a building and killed herself because of her." Blinded by rage, I raised my fists, ready to lunge at her again. Just then, the doors of the police station were pushed open, and Grandpa Wen staggered inside. He had rushed over in such a frantic hurry that he was still wearing his pajamas under his coat. The moment he approached, he delivered a thunderous slap across Wenran's face. "Is this how your parents raised you?" He then turned to me. "Come, Arao. Let us go home." Half an hour later, Wenran's parents and Wen Wenbo all converged on the villa. They kicked up a massive fuss, demanding that Grandpa Wen fire me. They urged him to wake up and stop letting me manipulate him, accusing me of harboring malicious intentions and seducing him solely to steal his inheritance. That was the only time I ever saw Grandpa Wen fly into a towering, uncontrollable rage. He swung his walking cane, viciously striking each of them, his voice roaring with fury. "You people have no sense of shame. But I do. I have already got one foot in the grave. If you want to spread vile rumors about me, fine. But Arao is just a young girl. Don't you have any conscience speaking about her like that? Let me make this perfectly clear. I am not firing Arao. And if you continue to threaten me, not a single one of you will ever see a penny of my money." Hearing the threat to their inheritance, the three of them tucked their tails and fled, though they did not forget to shoot me venomous glares of warning on their way out. Grandpa Wen sat alone in the cavernous living room. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows over his graying hair. He had grown so much thinner recently, yet his own children and grandchildren had not noticed at all. He patted the space beside him, signaling for me to sit down. "Do you hate me?" he asked, his voice cold and flat. It took me a moment to process what he was asking. He meant the suburban villa. If he had not announced his intention to give it to me, Wenran would not have caused a scene, and my grandmother would not have died. I shook my head. That night, Grandpa Wen told me many things. He explained that he was not a miser who refused to give his children money. Rather, it was because those very children had once driven his late wife, Grandma Wen, to her death over money. I learned then that Grandpa Wen had not always been wealthy. His fortune was bequeathed to Grandma Wen by a distant relative. The moment the money arrived, his two sons underwent a drastic psychological transformation. They came home constantly, incessantly demanding cash. During one of Grandpa Wen's absences, they cornered Grandma Wen, aggressively extorting her until she suffered a massive heart attack and collapsed on the spot. Initially, she had a window of time where she could have been saved. But after she went into cardiac arrest, her two sons used a hospital trip as leverage, threatening to let her die unless she revealed the password to the safe. She refused to speak, and because of their extortion, they missed the golden window to save her life. After her death, they had the audacity to claim it was her fault for valuing money over her own life. Arao, do you think she did the right thing? I clenched my fists so tightly my veins bulged. Grandma Wen was not wrong. They are not human. They are animals. Following that tragedy, Grandpa Wen's relationship with his sons plummeted into a permanent abyss. If it were not for the inheritance, those two men likely would never have bothered to look at his face again. Finally that night, Grandpa Wen gently patted my hand. "If I could, I would want to leave my entire estate to you. If I gave it to them, even when I go down to the underworld, my wife would never forgive me." He then revealed that he knew Wenran had ordered me to poison him. He said it was not my fault, as I was only trying to save my grandmother. "You do not need to rush to refuse me. You are a good child. If you won't accept this money, I will donate every last cent of it to charity." But neither of us knew that standing rigidly just outside the door, merely a step away, was Wen Wenbo, his eyes sharp as knives, brimming with absolute malice. Captain Sun sighed, pressing the interrogation forward. So, in order to seize the inheritance, Wen Wenbo forced Lin Rao to bear his child. Bear his child, though confused as to why Captain Sun phrased it that way, I shook my head. No. He attempted to rape Lin Rao, but failed. I squeezed my eyes shut, thoroughly repulsed by the necessity of recalling that vile chapter of my past. That night, Wen Wenbo did not act. The following day, he arrived at the villa alongside Wen Ran. The moment he walked through the door, he dropped to his knees before Grandpa Wen. Weeping and violently slapping his own face, he feigned profound repentance. He claimed he had dreamt of his mother the previous night and realized how monstrous his past actions had been, acknowledging that his selfishness had killed her. He declared that he wanted me and Wen Ran to act as witnesses. He was voluntarily relinquishing all rights to inherit Grandpa Wen's estate, asking only for the opportunity to fulfill his filial duties and care for his father in his final years. Father and son embraced, weeping bitterly. Even Wen Ran, standing off to the side, had red-rimmed eyes. But I sensed something was deeply wrong. Wen Ran knew perfectly well that Wen Wenbo's theatrical display was nothing but a ploy to secure the inheritance. If he took the lion's share, her family would receive less. Why then was she cooperating with his performance? There was undoubtedly a sinister conspiracy at play. After their emotional reconciliation, Wen Wenbo eagerly suggested taking Grandpa Wen out for a drive to get some fresh air. That was the first time I had ever seen a genuinely happy smile on Grandpa Wen's face. Wen Ran also proactively closed the distance between us, apologizing for her past mistakes and playing an audio recording of my grandmother's voice from before she died. As I broke down in tears, she considerately poured me a glass of water. A short while later, Wen Wenbo returned. He flashed an OK hand signal to Wen Ran, and a terrifying premonition instantly gripped me. But it was too late. My vision blurred, and my body was entirely sapped of strength. Wen Ran gripped my chin, her voice dripping with mockery. "Enjoy yourself. My second uncle has serviced quite a few women in his time. His stamina is certainly far superior to my grandfather's." With that, she turned and walked away. Wen Wenbo began tearing at my clothes, his breath hot and vile. "That old bastard wants to give you all his money, huh? Well then, you are going to bear a child for me. When the time comes, that money will still fall into my hands. That old fossil has one foot in the grave, yet you managed to bewitch him completely. I want to see exactly what makes you so irresistible." His searing lips dragged violently against my neck. The disgusting, sticky sensation of his saliva forced my mind to cling to a shred of consciousness. He aggressively unbuckled his pants, straddling my face, growing increasingly excited. I stared up at his grotesque, lecherous face in absolute despair. I wanted to fight back, but my body would not obey. In that agonizing moment, I knew my life was over. "Why?" Captain Sun abruptly interrupted my testimony, his face pale and grim. As a fellow woman, why would Wen Ran aid Wen Wenbo in something so heinous? Why indeed? I let out a sharp, cynical laugh. "Captain Sun, you must have grown up poor, did not you? At the very least, you do not have a massive family fortune waiting for you to inherit." Wen Ran helped her uncle because she fully expected his future child to inherit the entire estate, after which he would split the wealth evenly with her. It is just a shame that Lin Rao was lucky enough to be rescued. That day, while driving Grandpa Wen to the antique market, Wen Wenbo made an excuse to turn back early. Although Grandpa Wen had not said anything at the time, his instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. He ordered the driver to return to the villa, but the driver stammered and made excuses. Panicking, Grandpa Wen immediately hailed a cab and raced back. He had frantically wrapped a blanket around my exposed body. His withered hands, trembling like dry branches, kept gently patting my back. "I am sorry, Rao." Grandpa came back too late, but it was not too late. If he had been even one step slower, I likely would not have possessed the will to survive to this day. That was the second time Grandpa Wen saved my life. Captain Sun's face was etched with deep emotional turmoil. It took him a long time before he asked his next question. "Are you absolutely certain that after that incident, Lin Rao and your second uncle had no further contact? In other words, is the relationship between them truly just what you observed, and nothing more?" I was completely bewildered. "Don't you find it strange? Your second uncle is a highly cautious, paranoid man. How could he possibly be kidnapped by Lin Rao?" Well, obviously, I thought, What other reason would she have to contact a piece of absolute scum like him other than wanting to hack him to pieces? But Captain Sun's expression told me the situation was far more convoluted than I realized. "What exactly are you trying to say?" I asked, my voice tight. He produced a piece of paper. The letters on it were mismatched in size, clearly cut from various books and magazines and pasted together. "Want Wenwembo alive. Trade the will." I laughed out loud, a sound born of pure incredulity. "Don't tell me you actually think Lin Rao wrote this." But clearly, that was exactly what the police believed. I suddenly recalled his earlier statement. Lin Rao coerced Wen Wenbo into killing Grandpa Wen and then kidnapped him. How was that possible? Captain Sun explained that the blood found at Grandpa Wen's crime scene belonged to Wen Wenbo. When they went to apprehend him, they discovered he had been abducted. The only clue the kidnapper left behind was this ransom note. "We have investigated thoroughly," Captain Sun said. "Lin Rao has no immigration records, no property purchases, and no rental history. 5 years ago, she vanished from the face of the earth." I sneered, a mocking curve to my lips. Who knows? Maybe she died 5 years ago. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I had literally just testified that I saw her the night before last. How could she be dead? Fortunately, Captain Sun did not catch the discrepancy. "We suspect that over the past 5 years, she has been secretly harbored and concealed by your second uncle. In other words, she willingly stayed by his side because she wanted revenge. She wanted to personally murder him." My heart suddenly skipped a beat, the blood in my veins turning to ice. Yes, I wanted to kill Wen Wenbo, but not now. I wanted to kill him 5 years ago. I was not the type to subscribe to the philosophy that a gentleman's revenge takes 10 years. If I wanted revenge, I wanted it immediately. At that time, I had just finished my first reconstructive surgery. Grandpa Wen told me that once I recovered, he would send me abroad. I knew he had my best interests at heart, and I deeply yearned for peace, waiting for the day I could restart my life. But every time midnight struck, I was plagued by horrific nightmares of Wen Wenbo attempting to rape me. Faced with his degradation in my dreams, I was no longer the paralyzed, drugged victim. I did not know where I found the strength, but I would grab the fruit knife from the table and plunge it without hesitation into his stomach, his chest, his eyes, and his mouth. Every time I woke from the nightmare, an overwhelming sense of vindictive euphoria washed over me. Eventually, the dreams were no longer enough to satisfy me. I realized that only by killing him with my own hands could I truly begin a new life. I formulated a meticulous plan. First, I would lower his guard. Then, I would deceive him into believing I had romantic intentions toward him. When he inevitably showed up at my door, I would use the exact same fruit knife from my dreams. I would stab his eyes out first, cut off his tongue, and slowly torture him to death. The plan was proceeding flawlessly, but right before the day we were scheduled to meet privately, Grandpa Wen discovered the text messages organizing the rendezvous. He stared at me in total disbelief, his eyes brimming with such agony they looked ready to burst. "A row. What are you doing?" I was completely honest. I want to kill him. In truth, I was terrified of his reaction. After all, that was his biological son. But instead, he let out a heavy sigh and then asked me a question. "So you no longer wish to live a new life? Between venting your anger and continuing to live a good life, which do you choose? Have you forgotten you once said you wanted to see the largest lavender fields in the world? Have you forgotten you said you wanted to become a highly respected designer?" They were just idle, whimsical dreams I had mentioned in passing, yet Grandpa Wen had etched every single one of them into his heart. In a heartbeat, the room plunged into silence, save for the rhythmic patter of rain violently striking the window panes. A long moment later, Grandpa Wen broke the silence, his tone remarkably gentle. "A row. You have your entire future ahead of you. As for Wen Wenbo, if you trust me, leave him to me." And so, adopting the identity of Wen Ran, I left the country. Lin Rao evaporated overnight, and you hurriedly went abroad. Your second uncle swiftly got married, and your grandfather suddenly began transferring money to Lin Rao. Captain Sun lowered his voice. I could tell he was trying to suppress his own emotions as he asked the question again. What exactly happened 5 years ago? Right at that moment, my phone shattered the tension with a crisp notification chime. I clicked it open. It was a text message from an unknown number. If you do not want your secret exposed, be a good girl and bring the old bastard's will to me. My hands began to violently tremble. My heart seized in my chest. Who was this? Not only did they know the will was in my possession, but they also knew about my secret. My brain rapidly connected the dots, immediately yielding the answer. Wen Wenbo. Grandpa Wen had not lied to me. After I went abroad, Wen Wenbo's life had been a living hell. His business partners abandoned him one by one, and his company went completely bankrupt. Desperate to salvage his business, he repeatedly went to Grandpa Wen to beg for money, only to be violently chased off the property. Driven to a corner, he resorted to borrowing from loan sharks, and was nearly hacked to pieces by underworld thugs when he could not pay them back. Behind every single one of those catastrophic failures was the unseen hand of Grandpa Wen. This was his biological son, the child he had cradled in his own arms. Yet for the sake of a girl with whom he shared zero blood ties, he had relentlessly driven his son to the absolute brink of death. In a fraction of a second, the entire tapestry of events stitched itself together in my mind. My heart felt as though an invisible hand were crushing it. The bridge of my nose stung, and tears immediately welled up, threatening to spill over. Less than 30 seconds later, another message from Wen Wenbo arrived. 3 minutes. If you do not reply, I will send all the evidence to the cops. Captain Sun noticed my drastic shift in demeanor and urgently asked, "What is it? Who texted you?" I hurriedly wiped my tears away. Before I could formulate an answer, Wen Wenbo sent a third message. It was a photograph of a handwritten envelope. Written across the front were the words, "For a row to open personally." It was unmistakably Grandpa Wen's handwriting. My mother took a bad fall. I lied to Captain Sun. I need to rush over and check on her right now. Please excuse me. When Wenbo instructed me to meet him at an abandoned warehouse on the Puit outskirts of the city. By the time I arrived, dusk had fallen. The sunset was a bleeding, brilliant red, exuding a desolate, tragic beauty. I had barely taken a few steps before I heard Wen Wenbo's arrogant, grating voice echoing from inside. Just you wait. Soon you boys will be eating the finest foods and wearing the finest clothes with me. That old bastard used to use his pitiful scraps of money to blackmail me every single day, but who would have thought he would stretch his legs and drop straight into a coffin? Now all that cash is going straight into my pocket. A sycophantic voice chimed in. Brother Bo is the man. But Brother Bo, are you sure your niece is just going to hand the money over to you? That is hard cash we are talking about. Wen Wenbo laughed as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world. She won't? If she refuses. Not only will I force her to cough up the money, I will let you boys take turns having your way with her. Holy shit, then I would better make sure I service her properly. After all, she is Brother Bo's niece. When the time comes, you and I will tag team her. Yeah, ha ha ha. I could not stomach listening to another syllable. I delivered a brutal kick, sending the warehouse door flying open. Seeing that the arrival was me, the smug grin on Wen Wenbo's face instantly vanished. He casually ground out his cigarette, stood up, and sauntered toward me. You are here. Where's the stuff? I slapped his outstretched hand away. The split second our skin made contact, my stomach violently cramped in disgust. What is the rush? I said. I am already here. Why do not we sit down and have a proper conversation? I forcibly swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Wen Wenbo, I do not think there is anything left for us to discuss. He raked his eyes up and down my body for a long, sickening moment, then leaned in, whispering directly into my ear. Who says there is not? We used to be intimately entangled, flesh to flesh. Remember. I gripped the dagger concealed inside my purse, taking a deep breath to force down my rising panic. I had come here with a singular purpose. I needed to uncover exactly why Grandpa Wen had been sending him money, and I needed to find a way to make him pay with his life. With that resolve in mind, I slowly sat down, shifting my demeanor and flashing a cold smile. So, what exactly does Mr. Wen wish to discuss with me? Shall we discuss how you murdered your own father? Or perhaps how you used my name to extort money from him?" Wen Wenbo gestured to the thugs. The men immediately cleared out, leaving us alone. He reached out and roughly seized my jaw, his tone dripping with mockery. "This face, goddamn, it looks real. How many years did you manage to fool me? When exactly did you turn into Wenran? I never noticed a single flaw. When did it happen?" My eyes lowered. It had been so long, so incredibly long, that even I had almost forgotten. Following Wen Wenbo's aborted rape attempt, I developed severe psychological trauma. Aching for my well-being, Grandpa Wen moved me to the suburban villa and hired a live-in psychiatrist to monitor me 24/7. One day, the psychiatrist stepped outside to take a phone call. Moments later, the front doors of the villa were blasted open. Wenran charged in. Her eyes were bloodshot. Without uttering a single word, she lunged at me, throwing punches and screaming abuse. "You bitch! Have I not treated you well? I raised donations for you. I got you a job. If it was not for me, your grandmother would have died in poverty long ago." The word grandmother triggered an explosive fury inside me. I channeled every ounce of my strength to pin her violently against the floor. "If it was not for that donation of yours, I swear to God I would kill you today." She suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. "Kill me? Why do you think the psychiatrist left today? Do you actually think you are walking out of this villa alive, Lin Rao? If it was not for you, Grandpa's inheritance would already be mine. Do you have any idea how much debt my parents owe? If I do not get Grandpa's money, they are going to sell me to pay it off." In that fleeting moment, I honestly could not tell which of us was the more pathetic creature. Struggling wildly beneath me, she grabbed the fruit knife resting on the coffee table and plunged it deep into my thigh. Agonized, I scrambled backward to put distance between us, but she refused to let up, launching herself at me again. Physically, we were evenly matched. In a desperate bid for survival, I blindly grabbed a heavy chair nearby and smashed it violently into her body. "You piece of shit. If it was not for you, my grandmother would not have had to die," she continued to scream, deliberately provoking me. One strike, two strikes. Right at that moment, the doors to the villa opened. It was Grandpa Wen. He explained that he had been monitoring the villa's security cameras and saw Wenran arrive. Terrified that we would get into a violent altercation, he had rushed over as fast as he could, trembling. He reached out to check Wenran's breathing. The moment his fingers touched her, his entire body went rigid. I knew Wenran was dead. I had killed someone. My life was effectively over. I did not know what prison life would entail. Would this even be legally classified as self-defense? How many years would I be locked away? If I was gone, who would take care of Grandpa Wen? The sky outside was pitch black. The only illumination was the sallow, sickly yellow light from the ceiling casting shadows over Wenran's lifeless body. After an eternity, I spoke, my voice a jagged croak. "Grandpa, next time you hire a caretaker, make sure you find someone reliable. I have wronged you." Leaning heavily on his cane, he stood in silence opposite me. His clouded eyes remained locked onto Wenran's body on the floor. I could not decipher what he was thinking. I did not know how much time passed long enough that the wound in my thigh began to throb with a dull, sickening ache. He finally glanced at my bleeding leg, drawing in a massive breath as if he had just made a decision of colossal, earth-shattering magnitude. "Lin Rao." His voice was thick with exhaustion. "Do you want to become Wenran? I will contact a plastic surgeon to alter your face to look exactly like hers. You will go abroad for a while and then return. What do you think?" It felt as though an invisible hand had ruthlessly seized my heart. I could no longer contain it. I broke down into loud, hysterical sobs. Afterward, I followed Grandpa Wen's arrangements. I underwent half a year of reconstructive surgeries abroad before returning. When Wenran's parents received the news that Grandpa Wen was sending me abroad to study under the guise of polishing Wenran's credentials, they were ecstatic, to the point of madness. They firmly believed that Wenran's sacrifices had finally paid off. The money was practically falling into their pockets. Not a single person asked where the former caretaker had gone. If anyone ever brought me up, it was only to deliver mocking remarks about how I had failed to seduce the wealthy patriarch and was forced to pack my bags and slink away in disgrace. God damn it. You actually killed Wenran? Wenbo sneered. What kind of black magic did you cast on that old man that made him willing to protect you over his own murdered granddaughter? I had asked Grandpa Wen that exact same question once. He had not answered, so I did not know the truth either. Perhaps the letter he left behind held the answer. When did that old bastard give the will to you? Wenbo demanded. I answered truthfully. After dinner that night, when we went back to our hotels. He used a same-day local courier service to send it to me. At the time, I was perplexed as to why he did it, but Grandpa Wen simply said it was safer with me. Could it be that even then he had a premonition that he was in mortal danger? Suddenly, a realization struck me. I glared at Wenbo. The event from 5 years ago, you had a video recording of it, did not you? He froze for a fraction of a second before erupting into booming laughter. Exactly. Without that video, do you think that old bastard would have willingly coughed up money for me every year? So that was it. I collapsed backwards, slumping onto the floor in utter devastation. Grandpa Wen knew perfectly well that if that video ever leaked, even living under the identity of Wenran, I would never know a day of peace. That was why he had covered up the murder for me. But why? Hadn't he said that if he gave his money to his 2 degenerate sons, Grandma Wen would never forgive him, that she would not even speak to him in the underworld? It was me again. It was all my fault. Wenran had been right. I truly was a cursed jinx. I ruined absolutely everything I touched. I raised my head, my bloodshot eyes locking onto Wenbo's gleeful, triumphant face. I told you, he gloated. This money was bound to be mine sooner or later. Now hand over every last cent of... His voice abruptly hitched. He stared at me in total, paralyzing disbelief. Are you fucking kidding me? I smiled, and I told you. You are never getting a single penny from Grandpa Wen. The moment the words left my lips, I whipped the dagger from my purse and plunged it straight into Wenbo's flesh. I had rehearsed this exact motion countless times in my mind. Wenbo doubled over in excruciating pain. Without hesitation, I drove the blade into his back for a second strike. The entire sequence was absolute madness, yet my execution was chillingly calm and lethally decisive. Just as I raised the blade, preparing to slash his throat, the warehouse door was kicked completely off its hinges. Silhouetted against the fading light, Captain Sun stood with his firearm leveled directly at me. Lin Rao, he shouted, his voice trembling. Drop the knife. Don't destroy the rest of your life over a piece of trash like him. When I regained consciousness, I was lying in a hospital bed. Captain Sun explained that the combination of severe, prolonged fasting and extreme psychological stress had caused me to faint. Where is the letter? I asked, frantically. He handed it to me. It was undeniably Grandpa Wen's handwriting on the envelope. But when I opened it, it was completely blank. There was absolutely nothing inside. It was a forgery orchestrated by Wenbo, who had hired someone to mimic the handwriting. My heart sank, and tears immediately spilled over my lashes. It made sense. A man as meticulous and cautious as Grandpa Wen would never leave behind such a glaring vulnerability. Is he dead? I asked. Captain Sun shook his head. That bastard really has 9 lives, I whispered bitterly. Outside the window, the wind howled, sending dead leaves rustling to the ground. It was late autumn. I knew long ago that Wenbo was the one who killed Grandpa, I said. Captain Sun let out a quiet, After a long silence, he spoke again. I deliberated for a very long time over whether or not I should tell you this, but I feel that withholding it would be a grave injustice to you. Days before your grandfather's birthday, Wenbo suddenly uncovered your true identity as Lin Rao. Amidst his shock, his predatory instincts realized that an enormous, earth-shattering secret was buried beneath this deception. He utilized numerous illicit channels to investigate, but came up empty-handed. Finally, he decided to lay his cards on the table directly with Grandpa Wen. He threatened him. If the patriarch signed over the entire estate to him, he was willing to bury the secret forever. And Grandpa agreed to that, I asked. You could say that. No, that is impossible. My heart suddenly seized. Grandpa's will was never altered, that means. He had already prepared himself to drag Wen Wenbo down to hell with him. Grandpa Wen knew better than anyone that Wen Wenbo could never be trusted. Even if he handed him a mountain of gold, the man would eventually squander it all. And when that day came, Wenbo would inevitably return to extort and torment me again. It was better to sever the cancer at the root once and for all. His plan, Captain Sun said quietly, was to orchestrate a massive gas explosion. But Wen Wenbo never gave him the chance. That is why. I could not hear the rest. I was sobbing so violently I could not draw breath. Our people. Is everyone cursing his name right now? I choked out. Are they saying he was blinded by a seductress? That he murdered his own flesh and blood granddaughter, and even tried to kill his own son? Captain Sun neither confirmed nor denied it. I slammed my fists repeatedly into the hospital mattress. I really am a cursed jinx. Why was not I the one who died? Don't say that. Captain Sun grabbed my hands firmly. Grandma Wen passed away nearly a decade ago. For 10 years, he lived in absolute, agonizing isolation. I spoke to his neighbors. They said he once fell down the stairs, and he lay there until the paperboy finally found him. If it had not been for you, he would have been a walking corpse. Before he closed his eyes for the final time, you gave him the only true warmth and familial love he had experienced in years. Grandpa Wen's funeral was held 3 days later. At the memorial service, I publicly executed his will, donating his entire estate to charity. This was the decision Grandpa and I had discussed and agreed upon long ago. It was our greatest hope that this money would be given to impoverished young girls in the mountainous regions, girls who did not have enough to eat and who were denied the right to an education. As for Wen Wenbo, due to catastrophic blood loss, he ultimately did not survive. Karma had exacted its toll. As for me, I naturally had to await the judgment of the law. It may sound unbelievable, but my first night in the holding cell at the police station was the deepest, most peaceful sleep I had experienced in 5 years. In my dreams, I was reunited with Grandma and Grandpa Wen. Together, their voices spoke in perfect unison. Arao, make sure you live a good life. I will, I promised. I will live a very good life. The story concludes with a sigh of relief echoing within the cold walls of a prison cell, yet it leaves behind a profound tapestry of reflections for us all. The greatest lesson we can take away is that no one can truly outrun their past by hiding behind a mask. Lin Rao endured 10 reconstructive surgeries to alter her face and starved herself to maintain an illusion. She lived surrounded by luxury, yet possessed the terrified soul of a condemned sinner, forever walking on thin ice. True freedom does not come from stealing another's identity. It comes when you finally find the courage to face your own darkness. The most peaceful sleep that girl ever experienced was not in a 5-star hotel suite, but in a police interrogation cell, the exact place where the truth was finally dragged into the light. Simultaneously, this case paints a heartbreaking portrait of familial bonds and the inescapable law of karma. The cold-blooded monsters who drove their own mother to death over greed ultimately paid the absolute ultimate price. Yet, emerging from that swamp of human depravity, the light of humanity flickered brilliantly through Patriarch Wen, a man willing to trade his own life and completely sacrifice his reputation to protect a girl to whom he owed nothing, simply because she possessed a kind heart. This story also serves as a profound tribute to the silent sentinels who tirelessly pursue the light of justice. To those of you passionate about or actively working in criminal investigation, you are like Captain Sun. You require not just a cold, analytical mind, capable of dissecting the most microscopic details from a stray hair and a blood type to the timer on an air conditioning unit, but also a deeply compassionate heart. Your duty is not merely to unmask the killer. It is to hear the stifled cries of the victims, to understand the true root of the crime, and to offer redemption to souls that have lost their way. To the forensic examiners, you are the translators of the dead. When the deceased can no longer speak, it is the trauma on their bodies, the horrific fusion of flesh and blood, that speaks through your hands and minds to demand justice. To the legal professionals, Lynn Rao's case stands as a testament that the law is not merely a rigid boundary of black and white. It requires a nuanced understanding of the psychological shadows that drive human action. The law punishes the crime, but it also paves the way for a shattered life to be rebuilt. And finally, to the social workers and those who care for the elderly. Sometimes the devoted care of a complete stranger provides the familial warmth that isolated souls like Grandpa Wen search for in vain from their own blood. No matter how deeply the truth is buried, it will inevitably find its way to the light. We can only hope that, regardless of the adversity we face, we can still hear the quiet echo of our own conscience telling us, live a good life. Thank you for joining us and listening to this haunting case on GhostFish. If you are captivated by psychological true crime, high-stakes investigative thrillers, and the razor-sharp intellect of detectives, lawyers, and forensic experts, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every interaction from you is a massive motivation for our team to continue uncovering and narrating even more riveting stories. Until next time, we will see you in the next case.